The copper market should be strong, although there are some world events that may eventually change these in the short and long term. But right now, it's looking pretty good for our sector, I must admit. I mean, it's gone through some ups and downs recently, but I feel very positive right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews. I'm your host, Lucy, and some of you know me as Triangle Investor from social medias. Today, we are covering CopperCorp Resources, exploration company with assets in Tasmania, Australia. The company has focused on copper, gold, and rare earths. The company is trading under the symbol CPER, Toronto Stock Exchange, and in the United States under the symbol CPCPF on OTCQB. The man who will tell us more is Stephen Swatton, President and CEO of the company. Steve, it is great to have you in my show. You're for the first time my guest, so welcome.
Thank you very much, Lucio. It's nice to be on your show.
Thanks. Let's start with the overview of the copper market and copper equities performance. Tell me, what do you think of both going forward?
The copper market is looking a lot healthier at the moment as a result of the Chinese making certain assertions that the economy is going to increase to 5% based on rate cuts. The Fed cut also didn't do us any harm. So copper is looking stronger. And I would say that going forward, like a lot of other people have also mentioned, the copper market should be strong, although there are some world events that may eventually change these in the short and long term. But right now, it's looking pretty good for our sector, I must admit. I mean, it's gone through some ups and downs recently, but I feel very positive right now.
That's great to hear. Steve, I would like if we can cover all your projects, and we can start with Skyline. Maybe give us an overview of that project. What is the stage of this project, and what are you currently doing over there?
Yeah, the Skyline project is 170. Well, the actual project that we're looking at right now within Skyline is 170 square kilometers. It's called Razorback. The actual license is very large. It's probably about 300 square kilometers, and within that, we're actually exploring just south of Mount Lyell, 10 kilometers south. We're in the middle of a drill program. We yesterday announced our first hole has been completed, and we're moving on to the second one. Now, this license is within what's called the Mount Reed Volcanics, and the Mount Reed Volcanics actually is host to 4 operating copper mines right now. And it's quite interesting that they're quite different copper mines. There's one essentially just gold, another one's tin, another one's multi-commodity, and then we have the other one that's in there is Mount Lyell. It's not an operation, but it's in care and maintenance. And Sibanye, which is a mid-sized senior company, is actually trying to bring it into production. And in fact, I was there with our team talking to them, and they have quite a strong interest in what we're doing as well, which was encouraging to hear. They'd even heard our name and they knew what we're up to. And I could see that they were pretty active on the ground. Now, just to tell you, Lucio, there's a very strong mining support in this part of the world, and particularly the government reiterated that today, and I think it's going to be on TV, that they're giving grants to bring this mine back into production. And this has been in sort of on and off production for over 100 years, and recently it closed, but it's been reopened again with the current Sibanye team are trying to put it back into production. And it should be a grant that's from the government. They're going to give $25 million, and at the moment they're supporting it to the tune of $1 million a month to keep the mine running dewatered. So, I mean, this is in what's called the Mount Reed Volcanics, which is a lower Cambrian unit. And what we're essentially doing is we're just exploring the southern end of the mineralization that has been mined for 100 years.
I understand. Can you tell me more about the next steps for that project? What are you targeting
Yeah.
for the, let's say, period of 6 months for the project?
Well, just before before I got online here, I just basically took a little look at how many targets we have in this zone. We're drilling what's called the Dukes, which is one of the most obvious. It's also next to a main road. But we have north of 10 different targets that are on here. Each have had some work in the past. Sometimes it's just a few samples at surface. Sometimes it's a little bit of drilling that's been done in mainly in the 1970s and 80s, this area was looked at. But our next step is we're going to be drilling the second hole. And I was up there the day before yesterday. And look, it's snowing right now. This is supposed to be spring here. So the guys weren't exactly having a great time at the drill rig. But yeah, we started the second hole and it's going fairly quickly, much quicker than we were drilling at Darwin, simply because the rocks are different. And also, the, the rocks are more competent, and also the drillers are drilling longer shifts. So we're getting a good drill rate. So we've got the samples in the lab, and we should have sample results within 10 to 14 days at the latest for the first hole. So that's where
Oh,
we are with the program.
yeah, okay. Looking even more ahead, how much work is still required to bring this project in a mineral resources category?
Oh, this one would be a long time. We would have to do a significant amount more drilling, maybe make 20 odd holes to bring it into a resource category. But you've led me into another discussion that I could have with you. So we have what's called the AMC property, which is our
Yeah,
other property. We have
next
the
question.
Skyline and the AMC.
Yeah.
And that one, we have the Alpine deposit that's been previously drilled by a previous operator, Stellar Resources, in the past. And we've drilled it and we found two main units. And we would like to build a resource around that. It would have to be deeper drilling, though. There is some online extension, but it would have to be deeper drilling. And we have been considering doing more deep drilling on that, but it's expensive, Lucho. In this part of the world, it's not the cheapest place. I mean, it's certainly not by any means super expensive like maybe northern Alaska. But on the other hand, this is the wilds of West Tasmania. Some places are more remote than others. And that one is a little off the beaten track. And also because of the depth of the drilling, I don't want to blow the budget. We have 4 million in the bank right now, and we have some exciting looking targets on Skyline. And within this Razorback license, we have quite a few that are very close to infrastructure. And also, I think because of the high copper and gold content. Now, remember, at Alpine with the AMC, it's only copper that we have. We're very low on gold. We do have some, but very low. Here, we're just targeting relatively high grade. So it's 1% plus copper and up to about a gram gold, which was what Mount Lyell had been mining, and that's 3 million tons of copper at those sort of grades. So this is kind of world-class type of terrain we're looking at. And if I could just elaborate a little bit on the last drilling that we had. So we drilled 214 meters. And within that, we put out a release yesterday that we're sending quite a bit of the sample away for analysis. Now, we didn't actually in the news release state the amount of sulfide we had in there. We're quite careful about doing this. We realize that there's a lot of groups out there that sometimes, they make an estimation of the amount of copper or the amount of sulfide. And in our opinion, you've got to be really careful with that, particularly with our type of mineralization, because we have bands of sulfide and what we think is cupriferous in it. And then there's a lot of material in between, which you can see the sulfides in it. But because it's very fine grained, it's difficult to always be 100% sure if it's copper or it's pyrite. So we're kind of stepping back. There is quite a bit of sulfide in the rock that we've looked at, but we're a bit hesitant to try and estimate it all. That's just our approach. We maybe are a little bit conservative, but if you read between the lines, I'm pretty excited about what we see.
Yeah, sometimes conservative is really a great approach. But my question is that a porphyry system that you are looking or?
No, it's what's called an IOCG, iron oxide copper gold. And what we think we are, we're in the roots of the iron oxide copper gold system. Now, um, Mount Lyell is an IOCG as well. And what they've been mining is quite interestingly, is almost the whole profile from a very gold rich surface right down to the roots. And the better grades are in what's called the Prince Lyell deposit. And there's a couple of other ones called the Tharsis. And then there's one that's been mined out totally called Iron Blow. And you can see the profile in Mount Lyell quite nicely at the mine site. And what we think we have are the deeper levels of this, which is the higher grade material. And what we're drilling into right now with the drilling at Duke's is we're drilling into a magnetic target that's never been drilled before. There has been some previous drilling, one by something called the Mount Lyell Rail Company, Rail and Mining Company, and the other one with BHP. And if you see the cross section from our last news release, they kind of hit the edge of it. And this current hole, we're going right towards the mineralization. Now, we have said we're going to only drill 400 meters of drilling, but we have a license to go deeper. And I'm just being a little conservative in that because there's a high gold content, and if I don't see engine block material in there, I'm not just going to keep drilling for the sake of it. I want to see what we have so that I conserve some of the cash that we have to be able to pinpoint exactly where we want to drill the deeper holes. Because at the moment, the geophysics in these IOCG systems, Lucho, where you've got the combination of magnetics and gravity, and you've got a significant northwest fault, that seems to be the system that lines up in this part of the world. And we have to be sure that we're drilling, our best meterage where we want it to be. So we're not just going to be blindly drilling. We're not in the days of the end of the 90s, early 2000s, where when I was working in BHP, we used to drill blind everywhere, wherever we were, Ecuador, Chile, wherever we were working. We had a 20 drill hole project. Unfortunately, with the juniors being short of cash, we just can't afford to do that anymore. So we're just being slightly conservative with the way that we're drilling.
Okay. What about the Whisky Creek project? Can you tell me more?
Whisky Creek is one that's far in the future. It's one that's close to the northern towns, which are the main towns in Tasmania, which are the port towns. It looks like it might be a sediment-hosted type of copper deposit. It's one that is kind of low on our rankings right now. We're focusing mainly on this area to the south, and yes, it's something we picked up as a slightly optimistic, just to make sure that we could,
Okay.
it would, yeah.
Yeah, so you have multiple projects. What are your plans going forward? Would you like to remain focused on your flagship or maybe sell and JV other projects such as this one, Whisky?
Yeah, we would be open to consider joint ventures and also to be drilling the Alpine, which is deep. We would also consider looking at some joint ventures with possibly mid-sized senior companies as well. And that's probably what I'll be targeting later this year. The drilling that we're doing currently, we're planning to continue going full ahead with the Skyline, the Razorback project in particular. But also, quite frankly, Lucha, I mean, I haven't told you a bit about our history, but when I was with BHP, I did get exposure to a lot of different copper regions of the world. I was, in fact, the guy who was looking after copper on the business development side. So I have some experience in that. So, it would be remiss of me to tell you that we're only focused on Tasmania. We're also looking at other parts of the world, but Tasmania, we think, is our best bang for our buck. We have Tasmanian geologists in a jurisdiction, and I was telling you before we went on camera tonight that I was with the resource minister for Tasmania today. We received a grant today for some of the costs of our drilling, which was very welcome. And I was quite surprised to be asked to stand next to the minister in front of the cameras. So I'm sure if you look online, and I'll look on the TV later, my ugly shot will be on there.
I will definitely look at that. Tell me, so you have a great relation with the government, with the local authorities. How is actually doing business in Tasmania? I mean, the permitting process, cooperation with the people, skilled labor, if you can expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I would say that anybody who works in any jurisdiction will say that their area is great. And I always look, with some sort of foggy glasses at some people. But I must admit, Tasmania is a very good place. The fact that after this conference that I had today, the minister actually sat down, we had coffee, and we had a very pleasant discussion. There's the way Tasmania is, it's kind of triangle shaped, and the bottom half of the triangle is all tourism, fishing, and it's a beautiful part of the world. This is old. It looks like Britain in the 1960s. It's really wonderful. There's one small part in the northwest which has four operating mines. One, Mount Lyell, that is going to come into production, and it's got, well, Savage River is the other one, which is a large iron mine, and that actually stimulates most. That is the revenue source for most of the revenue in Tasmania. And so it's a Liberal government, which is a sort of centre right wing government, a very pro-supportive of the mining industry. Obviously, everything has to have its place. Like the tourism is extremely important, so the two have to coexist in the same environment. The backdrop to AMC is probably about 40 wind turbines. So we have 100% renewable energy, we have a supportive government, and we have a labor force that understand mining because we have four operating mines in the local area. Yes, this Hobart area where I'm sat doing this interview with you is more what you're a traditional sort of tourist town with fishing and everything else. But the Northwest, it's all about mining.
Let me just return on the thing you said. So you're M&A open company. So you have M&A on your radar to acquire new projects and even in the other jurisdictions. Did I get it right?
Yeah, well, I would say that any CEO, any company worth their salt who have some money, always have to be looking at that. I mean, don't the big problem with a lot of people, and I'm a geologist by background, and geologists have a horrible tendency to fall in love with their own projects, right? Because they think, they're going to try and prove something to the world. But you have to be very open-minded. You have to be able to look across and say, okay, I've got George over here and Roger over there who's offering me a project that actually on the face of it looks probably better than our own. Now, I haven't come across one of those yet, but I'm always open to the idea of it, and that's my job. And my geologist will kick and scream and say, this is the best thing we have in Tasmania. Or, if I can convince them otherwise, yeah, I'm trying to use the best use of my shareholders' money. And I don't really care where in the world it is. If it costs me a lot to move somewhere else for a limited return, I won't go. I've just got to spend the money as wise as I can.
Okay, good and diplomatic answer, but very good. I would like to ask you more. You mentioned your cash position that you have more than 4 million, if I remember correctly, in the till.
Correct.
For how long do you believe that that amount will get you through till the next financing round? Are you covered for 2024 and the first, let's say, few months of 2025? How is that? How is
Yeah,
your
but Lucha, it very much depends on how much we drill on this one. Now, it's very welcome that we got significant amount of cash back. In fact, half our costs have already been paid for by the government at the moment for the drilling there. But obviously, if we have some success, we'll continue going. I mean, I was looking today at, BHP's other projects. They got Olympic Dam, Carpentaria, Carrapateena, and they got a bunch of others in the Stuart Shelf. And I looked at the history of them, and look, none of these were found on the first hole. I mean, I was looking at Olympic Dam. It's found on the 10th hole, and even that is pretty aggressive. But the first hole had results very similar to when we went into a local adit and we had 35 meters at 1%, roughly 1% copper and 1 gram gold. They had very similar from one of their first drill holes, but it was only the 10th drill hole, and that was at quite some depth that they had the discoveries. Now, it would be very lucky if we have the discovery in the first two holes. And this is what really sometimes irks me is that the junior market expect you to have an immediate success right on your first hole. And it's not often like that. You have to drill around. But on the other hand, when you start having not so good success, the share price goes down. So then you suddenly are scrambling trying to find something else to push the price up if indeed you do need to financing. So in answer to your question, right now we're fine. But if you have success, I'll be looking to more. But I am going on a bit of a marketing campaign around Europe. Maybe I'll see at one of the conferences there, and I'll be hitting a few cities and making sure that the story gets out there. It's my job. My job
Yeah.
is to make sure we don't run out of money and we can raise money. I might be a geologist by background, but my new job is keeping everything ship float.
Yeah, spot on the expectations from the market. They expect you to find a deposit on the first hole, and it's really like that. And I spoke with a lot of CEOs and people who really succeed in their life finding deposits, and they said, I didn't. I had like seventh or eighth project that was a deposit. These six before they were not so good. So you have to have patience
Yeah.
with the drill holes, with the projects. I really understand that part, and you answered it correctly. Steve, how is difficult actually to raise money today as an exploration company? And I see in other commodities, gold, uranium, that small companies have difficulties raising money today. Is that the case with you?
Yeah, look, we haven't really had to go out and really test that in a way because we've had sufficient money from the IPO, which was 2 years ago, and we managed to sneak on through with the exploration program that we had. We've done one small raising this time last year, December last year, and that went really quite well. But you've got to remember that we do have some strong shareholders behind us. Not necessarily will they be taking place, but we have Ross Beatty, John Robbins, a whole bunch of others that are in behind the company that have supported it. Craig Roberts has been in there as well. So we have, and one of my advisors is Doug Kerwin. He's a very close friend of mine as well. Doug Kerwin is one of the most famous geologists. He was one of Robert Friedland's pioneering geologists finding Oyu Tolgoi. So look, it's one of those things where you're never quite sure until the moment that you go to do it. I can remember a very close friend of mine when I went out to do the financing last year. He fell off his chair laughing. He said, "You're going out to raise money?" Well, my name, I'm not going to say it. He said, "I can't raise anything right now." We went out and we closed it within 2 weeks. So your timing has to be spot on, and you don't know what it's going to be like when you're going out for the financing. But I can tell you one thing, Lucho, is that if you have success with drilling, you'll always be able to get the money. And like Nicola Bell said in one of her last interviews just a couple of weeks ago in Denver, when you have the ability to raise money, take it. And if we have some drilling success, I'll certainly be, obviously looking at say, okay, let's fill up the cash position here. But
Yeah,
am I in
agree.
trouble? No. Am I looking for money? No. Am I looking for other projects? Yeah. I'm doing all the things I think a CEO should be doing and trying to make sure that I can pay everybody and keep the lights on here, like within reason.
Agreed.
Yeah.
You mentioned some names on your share registry. How is actually your share registry looking? How much is retail? How much is held by big names? And then if you can disclose who are.
Yeah. I I would say that about 20% is owned by some of the bigger names, and the rest of it is mainly retail. We have Crescat, who are one of our shareholders, and other than that, it's mainly on the retail side. And look, I don't know if you looked at our recent couple of weeks trading. We've traded over, I think it's 13 million shares in 2 weeks. So there's a big flushing through, and in Canada, you're never quite sure who owns your stock at the end of the day. It's not like in Australia where you could look it up on any day and find out who's been selling. In Canada, you have to kind of play a game of charades trying to find out, who's owning your stock. It's not quite so easy. So I would say we're mainly retail, and we've got quite a strong online following right now, and it's interesting. I wake up every day and just wonder what the comments are, and they're generally positive, but of course they can turn negative in with just one small error. or something going on. But for now, everything's going fine in terms of, I think it's mainly retail. And as far as the people who are talking about a company, that I think they're thinking we're doing the right thing in the right location.
Okay, what about skin in the game? Do you own your stock and the management? How much do you own of the
I
company?
came, I'll be frank with you, Lucio. I came a bit late in the game. I wasn't part of one of the founding shareholders. I do have skin in the game, and I do have a nice option package going forward. There's a lot of incentive for me. I think that's generally what the question's about, is how much are you incentivized to make this work? I'm very incentivized. There's two main guys in Australia that own, one's both directors of the company, own a lot of the shares. And then there's a few high net worth individuals have some high positions. I'd say the top 10 positions own roughly 10% of the 10-12% of the company. But yeah, I mean, the people who make the decisions have a lot of skin in the game, put it like that.
Okay. What about G&A? How much are you spending? What's your monthly cash burn, management fees, and if you can expand on that a bit?
Yeah, if we're not drilling, it's probably about 100,000. It's just it's 80. We did a calculation. It was 85,000 a month or something like that with no. But then when of course you put the drilling cost, it all depends on what you're drilling and all that. But look, Lucho, we let go one field assistant and two geologists last year, and we could manage. We got a VPX, we got a senior geologist, and we bring staff on contracting. G&A is low. I think even Antonio Anastov, I think you know him, the other
Yeah.
interviewer, he commented that G&A was relatively low for a company of our size. It is because we're lean and mean. I mean, we don't have any expensive overheads other than the normal. So yeah, I'd say somewhere around 100,000 would be about right.
Okay, okay. What about marketing? You mentioned that you will attend conferences
Yeah.
and do some marketing. How are you generally approaching marketing? Do you have some companies involved in the marketing activities? How do you spread the word better?
Up until very recently, we've had no marketing at all. We didn't really see the point. If we're not drilling and we're not doing anything, we're not one to try and fluff up the share price just through a marketing exercise. But since we actually started this drilling campaign, and we're all very excited about what we're doing here at the Razorback property, we have taken on a group that are appealing to a younger crowd, if you like, a local one in Vancouver. And we're doing some digital marketing, but we're not even above 60,000 or something like that. It's a low one. But the point is that I will then use my contacts from, I'm British, right? So European background, and I'll use some of the contacts that I have in Germany, Sweden. I used to work for Lucas Lundin in the past and go to Sweden. And so I'm going to try and contact some of the old people that I knew known from before, who are now in senior positions, and use the old style, one-on-one meetings, going to conferences, talking about your stock, hearing what people say. If I have to do digital marketing, I will. But my personal approach is to be very hands-on and, like we're talking today. I prefer this type of approach.
Understood. Final question. Give your shareholders, the new ones and the old ones, message when and what and when can they expect in the terms of the news flow going forward?
The news going forward is always going to be on this property at Duke's, but the next property that we're looking closely at is one called Hydes, which is just south of it. And what we're targeting is, I mentioned it earlier, intersection between gravity, magnetics, and the structure. And we have several of these. And there's another property that we have on our ground, which has been looked at in the past, called Garfield. And that one has a drill intersection of over 100 meters at 0.3, 0.4% copper. Now, we haven't even mentioned that one yet. We haven't even got started on that one. It's a little tougher to get to because it's, it did have a camp into it and I would have to open it up. But we got a lot like that. So it's going to be it's going to be more drilling information, it's going to be assays, and then it's going to be more news flow on the Razorback. But yeah, like you said before, and quite rightly, you brought it up with, what else do you have on the go? It could be something on the M&A front, and I am looking at one thing in particular, a little bit more than the others. And it might be the AMC, the deeper drilling, that could be something that would be coming out. Like I used to work for Rio Tinto and BHP. I've spent 13 years in the majors, 13 years in the juniors. So I have a fairly good network, and I'll be using that to the best benefit of this company.
Yeah, Rio Tinto, BHP, Landins. Sounds like you are the right man for the work.
Well, and I used to work for Frank Giustra as well. There
That's
you
quite.
go. I know. I thought you would be asking me that as the first question. So I actually researched my own CV and I was a bit surprised myself, you know.
Yeah.
So 13 years in majors, 13 years in juniors, then 9 years doing other stuff, of which analyst was for Frank Giustra, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, this is the final question. Who are the people in your team that help you with everyday activities in the company? Who is in your management side and who is on your advisory and technical side?
Okay, so the main geologist that I have is a gentleman called Sean Westbrook. He's a Tasmanian geologist. He graduated from Codes, which is one of the most famous universities here. He's worked in Southeast Asia. I think he was working up in Laos for a while. Extremely gifted. He's the one who generally writes all the news releases, and then I just, make a couple of edits. But he's extremely gifted at the geology side. We have another gentleman, Sam Garrett, who's on the board member, who's also very experienced in Tasmanian and is a Tasmanian person himself. On the advisory board, we have we have several people. John Robbins is one of them, which is Discovery Group. We have Doug Kerwin, who I mentioned before was one of the co-discoverers of the Otorgoi. We have Leo Hathaway, who was, I would say, that one of the senior geologists, main geologists that was working for Ross Beatty. And we have Craig Roberts, who's he's a mixture between a financier, a mining engineer, and he's got some geology technical capabilities as well. So we got a very well-rounded technical team. But at the end of the day, I mean, the management side is very lean and mean. It's myself and Sean, and we make most of the decisions within the company. It makes it a little easier that way. But I have this whole group of people that I'm calling on a regular basis, which are kind of household names in Vancouver, which is great.
Steve, thank you for coming to my show. I wish you luck with all your projects, and let's catch up when you will have some new updates for us.